Shalom, and thank you for watching this video from Aydat HaDerekh Synagogue. I hope you are liking the content we are bringing you. If you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, that will greatly help us. And to further help bring great content to you from our teachers, if you could please consider to donate to Aydat HaDerekh Synagogue. The link is in the description box below. Thank you for watching.
Chag Sameach to everybody. I wanted to talk for a little bit today about one of the elements of the Seder. And before I do, I wanted again to remind everybody to, if you do not have a Haggadah for a Seder for tonight or going forward for study, the Shuvu Haggadah from Nisan to Nisan is available to be downloaded for free for anyone that wishes. We ask for donations, but the Haggadah itself is free, and it's got wonderful, really up-to-date messianic commentary by Rabbi Shapira and myself. I would suggest anyone go ahead and download this Haggadah. You have to register, but other than that, it's absolutely free. Okay, so let's talk about one of the more prominent sections of the Seder last night, and that is the story of the four sons. Now, we typically have a lot of fun with the story of the four sons, as well we should. The Seder is intended to be a fun evening of learning and of explaining to children, and of a festive meal, and of social activity, and just general fellowship and fun. But in with this is the learning part, right? The reason that we have the Seder is because Torah teaches us when your children ask, you shall relate to them the entire story of the Exodus from Egypt. So included in this recounting of the story of the Exodus from Egypt, including the basic elements of Pesach, the offering, the matzah, the maror, the bitter herbs, the egg, the chagiga, the festival offering. Included in all of these things and interwoven into it is this story, which at first glance is really kind of out of place, right? There isn't an actual tie to the Pesach story itself, and that is the story of the four sons. Now, the only tie of the story of the four sons to Pesach is that the way that the lesson of the four sons is presented is through questions about the Exodus from Egypt. Right? So, four sons are asked or ask about the recounting of the story and what it means to them. So the first thing that we can really take out of this is we should be asking ourselves, what does it mean to me? Why am I telling this story? Why am I going through this ceremony and this ritual? And the symbolism is rich, and I understand that. But really, why am I doing this? And this is what the story of the four sons really gets us to think about is, you know what, I should be asking this question as well. And so the story of the four sons begins interestingly, with the wise son, HaChacham. And the wise son asks, what does this ceremony mean to us? Now, if you look at the Hebrew, it doesn't actually say to us, but the way the question is phrased, it's in a collective manner. So an accurate translation is to say to us, because the whole concept is that the wise son is including himself in the retelling, in the celebration of the Seder, and not objectively looking at this from the outside. He is an active participant, and this is counted as wisdom. In many ways, the Seder table is an analogy for wisdom's table in Proverbs chapter 9, where we are invited to wisdom's table. So come and consume. The word to learn is also a word to eat, ochel. So come to wisdom's table and consume, right? So we come to the Seder table and we eat. And in this way, the wise son really gets it, okay? Now, in order to contrast, so we can really learn the lesson, we have a second son who is the Rasha, who is the rebellious son. Sometimes it's translated evil. I don't like that translation. Rebellious works better for me. So the rebellious son asks, what does this mean to you? And this is a major part of the lesson. In saying you, what he's doing is he's excluding himself. Now, I'd like everybody to note that this is not necessarily a malicious exclusion. Right? It's just, I'm not really part of this. And it could be looked at one of two ways. Okay? Those of you that have raised teenagers understand that there is a portion in establishing independence, right? For a person, every person, myself, everybody goes through this. There's a portion of time where a person reevaluates everything going on around them and then chooses to be a part of some things and not parts of others. Now, in modern times, many times, this means with a teenager that they will choose to be part of social grouping, school, friends, whatnot, and reevaluate or choose not to be part of what family, parents are doing, things like that. And this is, it's not pleasant, but it is a normal part of growing up and establishing independence, is saying, aha, I can choose. Whereas younger children, it doesn't really occur to them that they can choose. Okay, so here we get to this point in life, say, I can choose. So here is the rebellious son, and say, making a choice. What does it mean to you? Now, the other side of this, warning and part of the lesson, is that perhaps we're not talking about a rebellious teenager. Instead, what we're talking about is somebody who looks at the story from an outside observer point of view, like an academic. Right? And that is, well, I'm not part of this, but it's an interesting and fascinating study. But I'm not, I'm an observer, right? I'm not actually participating, I'm an observer, right? And this attitude is counted as rebellion, is counted as being Rasha. Okay? Now, the third son is described with the word in Hebrew, tam, which has no English equivalent. This word is it's very difficult to translate. I tell you, my heart goes out to all translators, because one language to another usually does not work that well. Usually I have to describe terminology, and if you're translating, you can't do that. This is certainly true with Scripture, and it's true in a lot of other things. So this word tam is translated as a simple or innocent, right? Yaakov Avinu was described as tam, simple, innocent. It is also the descriptive word for a sacrifice, right? That the sacrificial goat or the sacrificial lamb or the sacrificial bull must be tam in order to be sacrificed. And this is translated as unblemished. Okay? So we get even a different flavor for the terminology here as well, right? If the child asking the question is tam, the idea is that there's no malice in him, right? They are unblemished. Now, I'm using that word in an English language sort of way, right? That they're unblemished in their heart. Okay? And Scripture uses it unblemished, no kidding, unblemished, that there's no physical flaw. Okay? But part of the meaning also is beyond that, and means unblemished as far as our heart is concerned, even in with the person, like the sacrificial animal is unblemished as well. Okay, the fourth son is so young they don't even know how to ask a question. So the first thing that we have to look at is the fact that the story is told to all four sons. Right? Doesn't matter. There's wise, rebellious, Tom, or so young can't even ask questions. Doesn't matter. Everybody hears the story. Everybody hears the story. Every year, everybody hears the story. Okay? In fact, it's more than every year that everybody hears the story. Right? We are reminded of the Exodus from Egypt all through the year. Every Shabbat, when Papa stands up to make Kiddush at the Shabbat table. Right? The prayer of the Kiddush, the blessing for wine. What's included in that is the phrase, Zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, in remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. So we're supposed to remember this all the time. Okay? And the entire story is told at least once a year at the Pesach Seder table. It's the purpose for the Seder itself. So the four sons are all told the story. Doesn't matter their attitude, they're told the story. Right? If you're wise, you're told. If you're rebellious, you're told. This can be a little tricky in a family dynamic, but supposed to be told. If you're tam, if you're simple or innocent or unblemished of heart, you're told. And if you don't even know how to ask the question, you're also told. Okay? So nobody gets a pass. Everybody is told the story. Okay? And they're told, now we look, they're told in such a way that they can comprehend. So the wise son. What does this mean to us? Okay? And again, the direct to Hebrew translation doesn't say that, but the collective is implied, so it's not a bad translation. It's a good translation. In doing this, he is participating. It's interesting that the wise son is participating. Now, if we're looking at inclusion as being something that's not objective, okay? That you cannot be an outside observer objective and include yourself. we come up with a very interesting concept, and that is that the Rasha, the rebellious son, may also be wise. Okay? In English, that works. Okay? In other words, he may be intellectually smart, but he chooses to remain objective and outside observer. Okay? And this is not right. This is one of the main lessons of the story of the four sons, is that we are to be participants, that we're supposed to do this. It's not we're supposed to observe this. It is one of the great lessons and the great differences between Judaism and some other types of worship of Yeshua and God. Okay? Is that we are not outside observers. Now, too often we get caught up in a practice where we go through life, our faith life, as an outside observer. I'll go to synagogue, or I'll go to church, and I'll sit in the seat, and I'll sit there. The rabbi or the pastor will talk, and I'll sit there, and I'll evaluate. I made a good point. I messed that up. I agree with that. I don't agree with that. Understand, this is exactly what being an outside observer means. You're not participating in it. You're not making it part of who you are. You're sitting objectively evaluating. And this is the sin of the rebellious son. It's what we're saying shouldn't be. It's the wise son who is not objective, who is not a third-party observer. The wise son is in the midst of it. The wise son is participating and takes it to heart and is involved and knows that this is part of who he is and acts that way. And what is said of the Rasha, of the wicked, or translated evil sometimes, of the rebellious son? That if he were in Egypt, he wouldn't have been redeemed. He wouldn't have been redeemed. All right? Now, Torah teaches with a very interesting word, okay, that Israel came out of Egypt armed, which makes absolutely no sense. Okay? We were slaves, now we're leaving, we're armed? No, it doesn't make any sense. But the word that is frequently translated armed has another meaning. Chamushim. Chamushim. The other meaning is 1/5. Chamesh, 5, chamushim, 1/5. And the Chazal explained to us that this means that 1/5 of the children of Israel actually come out of Egypt. The rest don't. That 1/5 of the children of Israel go through the ceremony and paint the blood over their doorposts, and their firstborn are spared. 20%. Which means the others were outside observers. The others were spectators. They weren't participants. They didn't participate. And guess what? They weren't redeemed. They stayed in Egypt. And this number 20% comes up in other places as far as a remnant is concerned. 20%. 20% of Israel returned after the Babylonian exile with Ezra and Nehemiah. Right? 20% returned. It's the same representative number as that came out of Egypt. Okay? So this is what's meant by the rebellious son or the wicked son, that he wouldn't have been redeemed, is that he was being an outside observer. So he wasn't actually participating. the simple son, right, is just going to absorb. It's just going to be absorbed. There are many among us that have this type of personality. Some describe themselves as introverts. Okay? You don't have to be the one that's loudly banging on the table during Birkat Hamazon. You can just say Birkat Hamazon, that's fine. You're Tom. You are a little more withdrawn, but you are unblemished of heart. There is no malice in you. Now, I think that we know or have known many, many people like this. And for me, in my congregation, as I've grown in this work, there is one man that I will remember forever as my example for me of someone that is Tom. That was a gentleman named Howard Kirshner. Howard, may his name be remembered for a blessing. Howard was a yeshiva boy. He was a yeshiva boy, and he was in a car accident, and he had massive brain damage. And so he could not recall or retain information after that. So all of his brilliance in the yeshiva overnight was gone. He came to faith in Yeshua, and he loved God, and he loved Yeshua. And that was it. That was enough. That was enough. And I remember we called him to the Torah in the congregation for the first time. And he knew them, but I had to help him through the Torah blessings, and it didn't matter. And the tears were coming down his face because he got to make an aliyah before God, before Yeshua. So for me, that's the idea of Tam. That's the idea of innocence, of no malice in the heart, of being unblemished. Okay? Could be a bit reserved. That's fine. People don't have to express their passion for God and for Yeshua the Messiah in the same way. And this is a reminder of that. Everybody has their own way. Okay? But, and we'll get to the but, for the child that doesn't even know how to ask the question. Okay? So this is a season. This is a moed. And children must be taught to understand that this is something that happens. This is periodic. This is something that is part of who we are. It's object permanence. Right? We play peekaboo with babies. Right? Peekaboo. Why? It teaches the child object permanence. That you can't see mommy or daddy doesn't mean they're not there. Doesn't mean they've disappeared. They're still there. Right? They're still there. Peekaboo, I'm their back. Right? Teaches the child object permanence. So do the Moadim. And specifically Pesach. This is something permanent. And it happens every year. And we talk about it every Shabbat. We talk about it all the time. But this one day a year, it's a marker. And it is permanent with the children of Israel. It's the permanency of the Moed with the children of Israel that we teach. So, many, many lessons here. Okay? And the big one is participate. This is not a spectator sport. You do it. Don't watch the rabbi do it. Well, you can watch the rabbi do it, but you do it. You do it. Right? How many of you had a Seder by yourselves for the first time because of the virus situation. Do you know what a blessing this is? What a blessing this is. I mean, watching a virtual Seder is fine. But really, we should be participating. We do the Seder. Why? Because it is what Hashem did for me when He brought me out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. For me. This means I participate. And for all of you, that you participate. And if this is the first time you ever led a Seder, and in your mind what you're thinking is, oh, I did everything wrong, or I did that, I didn't do that, don't worry. You did it. Or if you're going to do it tonight, you're going to do it. Now, in the history of Judaism, this is a huge lesson. There was a time when the Jews in Eastern Europe had gotten to a point where the hierarchy of the rabbis had such a stranglehold on Judaism that you had nothing. You didn't have a good relationship with God. You had no relationship with God at all, unless you had time to go in and study and study and study and study. And out of this came a very important movement that said, no, if I participate, even if I'm tam, even if I don't know, even if I'm just there, but I've got to work all the time in order to keep my family from starving, so I don't have the time to go and study. If I have my heart in the right place, then I have a relationship with God. And these people are called the Hasidim. And they split away from a group called the Misnagdim. And out of the Misnagdim came modern Orthodox Judaism. And of course we see Hasids today, Hasidim today, which in fact have turned into exactly the opposite of what the Hasidic movement was to begin with the Baal Shem Tov. And they want to come back, many of them. And there's an internal struggle going on within the Hasidic movement. It's pretty fascinating to watch. But just to look at the Breslov and what they're doing, and the Chabad and what they're doing, and then the Satmar and the Bells and what they're doing. And understanding that so much of it, what they're doing, really what they want to do is get back to matters of the heart and the heart relationship with God. What does that mean? Participating. You cannot be a third person, objective observer and participate with your heart. If your heart is in it, you're not a third party observer. And indeed, with the story of the four sons, we're told not to be a third party observer. Get your heart involved. Right? If your heart is involved, you're not going to sit back and watch. You're going to be part of it. Okay? And this is what we want to do. So if you had your first Seder last night that you've ever done on your own or by yourself, Baruch Hashem. That's an incredibly wonderful and important thing. And remember, so for next year, do your own Seder. Yes, participate in a community Seder, that's fine. But also do your own Seder. It's why at Aydat HaDerekh, our community Seder, when we have it, we're not having it this year, is the second night. Why? So everybody in their homes, as we are supposed to do with our households, can participate and have their own Seder. Now, the wicked son, the rebellious son, would not have been redeemed. And this brings up a very interesting point. What happens with the Exodus from Egypt and the story of the Exodus from Egypt is that the children of Israel are redeemed. They're redeemed. They wander around Egypt for a week and then cross the Red Sea or Sea of Reeds, Yam Suf, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And they're redeemed. And they go through a process leading up to Sinai where we can receive Torah. And I say we intentionally because we were there. Redemption. Now, redemption does not mean the same thing as salvation. Redemption and salvation are often used synonymously, right? Interchangeably. Redeemed, saved, redeemed. But they don't mean the same thing at all. If we look at the term redeemed, or look at the idea of redemption, there are some key things that have or indicate a difference between that and the idea of salvation. Okay? If you are saved, it says that somebody is helping you out, and you get to continue living because they have saved you. Or you are no longer in danger because they continue, or you continue living and you've gotten out of a bad situation because someone has saved you. Okay? But that's not what a redemption is. That's not what being redeemed means. If you look at the story of Ruth, there's a redemption that takes place. All right? There's compensation that changes hands. Boaz redeems Ruth. He pays something. There's a price. He pays it. This is a good example of the idea of redemption. Okay? What happens with the firstborn son? Of which I am. Okay? When you're very little, you go through what's called the Pidyon Haben. You are redeemed from service in the priesthood, because the priesthood is now just the sons of Aaron, right? The sons of Pinchas, right? So you're redeemed. What does this entail? You pay the Kohen. There is a price. There is a payment that is involved, right? And you go through the Pidyon Haben, and you have symbolic shekels, and you pay the Kohen, you get a certificate, okay. And you've been redeemed. So when we talk about the children of Israel being redeemed, there's a price. That's what the word redeemed means. Goel Yisrael is the redeemer of Israel. So what's the price that is paid? If God redeems Israel, what's the price that is paid? And we're going to get back to that. But I want to pose a question. Okay? Yeshua the Messiah is executed during the Pesach, during the sacrifice. It's going on at the temple. He's resurrected during the Moed, during Chag HaMatzot. Yeshua the Messiah has direct ties of him to the Pesach. And we often talk about Yeshua the Messiah and his death and resurrection being a redemptive act. Now, we must understand that the Mashiach is eternal. The Messiah of Israel, Yeshua HaMashiach, is eternal. Now, the Gospel of John, at the beginning of it, explains this to us in sort of a cryptic manner that requires a lot of study. But the fact is the fact. Yeshua the Messiah is eternal. So, Yeshua the Messiah being killed, okay, as part of the redemptive act has to be examined. All right? Now, within Judaism, we understand that the death of a tzaddik atones. The death of a tzaddik of Israel atones for Israel. Now, This is in Talmud and is commonly understood within Judaism. But if we look at this for a minute, who is the tzaddik? And that is the Messiah. That is the Messiah. It is Yeshua the Messiah. So the death of Yeshua the Messiah atones. Why? Because it is a redemptive act. How is it redemptive? Well, the price that Yeshua the Messiah paid was his life. He's killed. He's executed. That's the price of redemption. Beyond time and space. Beyond time and space. So in this way, the death of Yeshua, the tzaddik, redeemed is the price for the redemption of Israel from Egypt. That's why the Yeshua story culminates in the Pesach. Why is Yeshua the Pesach? Why is Yeshua the Passover lamb? Because the sacrificing of the Passover lamb, the eating, the roasting and eating of the Passover lamb, right? Taking the hyssop, dipping it in the blood, smearing it on the doorposts, is all ceremony that we participate in. That this is something that we do because of our heart. We are not third-party observers. We're in the thick of this. We're doing it. We love God. We love the Yeshua the Messiah, so we're doing it. And so we redeemed with the price of the redemption, which is the death of Tzaddik HaTzaddikim, of the righteous one, the most righteous of all righteous, the death of Yeshua the Messiah. This is the act of redemption that releases Israel from Egypt. And this is why the Last Supper was a teaching Seder. And this is why when Yeshua died and is resurrected, that the world was never the same. Was never the same. So I want everyone to keep in mind the lessons of the four sons. And keep in mind Yeshua's death and resurrection as being the redemptive act that brought us out of the land of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. I hope everyone has an absolutely wonderful Pesach. Hang in there. The virus is not going to last too much longer. Until then, be careful, and our vigilance will take time off of this separation where we can be back together again. Chag Sameach.